Welcome back to the PerpCast. I'm your host Ray, the social media and PR manager for Perp Games, and this is a special edition of the PerpCast dedicated to fitness in VR. As you've seen from social media this week, we're looking at Ninja Legends from Coinflip Studios, and joining me today is David Geisert, product engineer at Coinflip Studios. How are you doing, David?
Doing great this morning. Joining from California, yeah.
Nice and sunny over there. Thanks again for doing this.
Absolutely. I'm so glad to be here, and great to talk about Ninja Legends.
So yeah, as David said, we're going to be talking all about Ninja Legends, what it's about, why it has fitness benefits, and much, much more. So I guess it makes sense to start from the top. So tell us a bit about Ninja Legends. What is it, and where can people play it?
Yeah, Ninja Legends is the most intense combat game in VR. That's our tagline and also our design mantra. It's on quite a few platforms right now, most recently Pico for anybody in China. And then we're on the Oculus Store, Quest Store, Vive port Infinity. So lots of places to get it. And we're working on the PSVR port still. Hopefully that'll be out soon.
You've given us your design mantra for that, but what exactly what's the kind of the core aim of Ninja Legends? What are you doing within the game?
Yeah, we wanted the player to feel like a badass when they're playing. And I think we hit that pretty much on the mark. The player gets to jump in as a really powerful ninja. As waves of other ninjas come and attack you, you slice them, dice them, and split them like the Fruit Ninja meshes. But this is when they're actually attacking you. So you also have to block and worry about projectiles coming in. And then we have 18 levels going through is our story mode to fight multiple bosses along the way. Also, we have endless for people who just want to get a good workout and go as long as they can, as well as a couple archery modes we added as an update. Yeah,
sounds really awesome. So, I mean, yeah, you've touched upon a key point there. So I suppose a lot of kind of action games in VR really sort of emphasize flailing around and attacking as much as possible. We've actually highlighted about Creed how defense and blocking is so crucial to your survival within the campaign mode in that. And you sort of touched upon it there with Ninja Legends. So how kind of crucial is the defense mechanism really to survival in Ninja Legends?
A lot of that depends on what difficulty you're choosing. If you're going down to what we put as novice, that's a difficulty we put in for like a young kid in first time in VR, or you're showing it to your grandparents, and you can just get hit about 30 times before you're going to lose the level. But if you crank up the difficulty, you can take 1, maybe 2 hits depending on which enemy you're fighting, and then you lose. So blocking when you're actually playing the hard difficulties is very important.
It's easy for you to literally just dive into an action game and just like flail around. And the beauty of it, the format, is that it allows a more sort of freedom of movement. So I guess our instinctual reaction when something is coming at us is to block off or protect our faces or protect our body in some way. And VR really does capture that in the sense that, you know, when you do move in that direction, that is essentially your blocking. So it really responds to how you would react in that situation.
Absolutely. And we also chose to make the enemy attacks just slightly lower than what like a ninja would actually do, going for the head. So you don't ever feel that scared feeling of having something flying at your face, but you do get the feeling that it is coming and attacking you.
So you've talked about the simplicity of controls, and how important is it for you to get that right? And I guess that makes it like sort of super accessible to those who just want to dive in for a quick workout or just for a new player.
Absolutely. We wanted to make sure the controls were as simple as possible so that anyone could just jump in. We don't do any of the artificial locomotion until you get into some of the new archery modes. But with the main game, we have it really, really simple. Only triggers are needed during the actual gameplay, and you just swing your arms around. We give you a little dummy in the menu scene. So if you want to test out weapons, you can just do it there. See what works, see what doesn't. Going back to what you said with flailing, if you just wiggle your wrists like you can in Beat Saber, that doesn't work in our game. You have to actually move your hand, and the speed of your hand determines the damage much more than the flick of the wrist does.
Well, that's actually really important as well, because we've talked about how your instinctual reaction in VR is like to protect your face, protect your body, but it also responds to the pressure that you actually exhibit when you're in motion. And I guess your game is a perfect example of that, again, is in sense that, you know, the amount of effort you put into it responds in game, in kind.
Yeah, if you move your hand more, you're going to do more damage. And if you move your body more, you're going to take less damage. Because you can dodge out of the way of these attacks coming in. If a projectile gets thrown at you and you just step to the side, it's going to miss. Even though it's taking this giant curving arc, so you have time to hit it back. If you just move out of the way, that also works.
And I guess that really sort of ties into what we've been saying, that Ninja Legends is really good for fitness benefits, because essentially the more effort you put into the game, the more you can essentially get out of it. Did you always kind of, in your mind when you were developing Ninja Legends, did you always foresee that it would be a game that would have some fitness benefits, or was that just kind of a happy side effect that came about when development?
It was a happy side effect that came about from a couple of our core design choices. One being that we didn't want people to just wiggle their wrists. So that brought in the arms and had them moving a lot. And then once we had the ability to dodge the attacks coming in, that added the rest of the body movement. You can also like just squat down to dodge. You can move out of the way. And all those design decisions to make the game more immersive naturally made the game more of a workout because it's closer to what you would actually need to do in a fight like that.
I think a lot of the games that we've talked about throughout this campaign, they've not necessarily been designed as fitness applications, box VR aside, but they've really shown VR can be a real force for, health benefits in the future.
Absolutely.
And I think that, as you mentioned there, it's like the amount of effort that you put into this really does translate. And it's I think it's an interesting time for VR for sure, and in terms of how that fitness aspect can really progress going forward.
Yeah, and one of the fun things about our game is we have lots of different ways you can pump up that fitness aspect. You can turn on a couple of the secrets or turn up the difficulty. Like you can make the enemies super speed, and it's going to be a much better workout. And then you can make yourself invincible on top of that. So you do an endless invincible super speed run, and that is going to be an intense workout that goes as long as you want it to.
Sort of ties into what I was going to ask you next about daily challenges, but I mean, you've got modes there which really sort of facilitate the work aspect to it. But the game has daily challenges. And have you sort of designed some of those in a way that would kind of work towards a fitness regime in some way, or be part of someone's daily workout routine?
They're not specifically designed around that, but it would definitely work that way because it's a mix of all sorts of different gameplay mechanics that you don't normally see in the game itself. An example there being the bow and arrow for a normal level. And that makes it much more difficult to complete the level because you only have the bow. There's no way to block. So you have to move your arms as quickly as you can to fire those arrows. If the enemies get to you, you're pretty much done in that challenge mode. So that will work out your arms. The next day, it's guaranteed to not be a bow and arrow level. And maybe you'll just do a single katana, so it's going to be much more about blocking and dodging. Or possibly you'll end up with the Mega Samurai or the Samurai group, and they're going to be all about blocking because you can't go against that many samurai and expect to just wail away.
You're encouraging replayability in your game as well, so you're encouraging people to keep revisiting and keep coming back, which I think is also so important too if you want to stick to kind of get a good workout. Whereas if like a game was just presented as normal, there was no sort of recurring hook, then
Absolutely.
perhaps they wouldn't return to that game. Daily challenge is so important.
Also, leaderboards come in a big part of that. If you want to jump up to the master leaderboards, that's where the real competition is.
Yeah.
A lot of the scoring that we put in, it matters a lot what your attack damage is per attack. So you want to get a fewer bigger attacks than a couple small attacks. The actual equation is complicated, but we're pretty much just squaring the attack power. So the bigger attacks get much, much more points, and the little attacks get very few points.
And you mentioned as well, like we've talked about how blocking is a crucial part of the game, but Ninja Legends has a full 360-degree rotation, so you're often having to look around behind you, defend from all sides, different angles. You've kind of got to have eyes in the back of your head a lot of the time, right? So there's a real emphasis on just protecting yourself from anywhere.
Yeah, and on the easier difficulties, we make it really easy to know that enemies are behind you, but once you go up to hero or master modes, those difficulties, it's a bit harder. The enemies will yell at you as they come in, so you don't have zero warning, but you do have to just keep on a pivot, keep looking around. If that's not your thing, there are levels where they only come from the front, so you don't have to do that all the time. And you can just skip through the easy levels on the lower difficulties. But if you really want the challenge and really want to have that pivot, going hard difficulties on such as like level 6, the streets at night, that is going to be a really big 360 challenge.
Yeah, and I think I can imagine how that would already get really frantic on tougher difficulties. So yeah, so I think that's a nice way you've positioned it so that you can build yourself up to that point in the game. I guess when you look at it, when you go to the gym and you kind of build it up when you're on the weight, you're doing dumbbells and you're trying to build up, you gradually get to the higher weights, the bigger weights. So you kind of like you kind of build yourself up to that point in the game where you're like, right, I feel more confident now that my reactions are quick enough to deal with that. So that's really cool. I like that.
Yeah, originally we were going to do it kind of like the 007 GoldenEye level unlocks, where you have to kind of progress your way through on each level or progress your way through on each difficulty. But we decided that if you really want to enjoy a level later on and go up a higher difficulty, you can just jump in if you've gotten to that level.
Just to sort of change gears slightly, tell us about the different weapons that are in the game. So obviously, I guess we know we've talked a bit about the bow, we talked a bit about the sword, but what other weapons do you have in Ninja Legends, and how differently do they handle?
Yeah, we had originally 6 weapons and 4 special abilities. So the 6 weapons were the double katana, just regular double katana. Then we had the reversed blade in one hand, smaller, and the larger blade. That's the wakizashi and adachi. And then there's the Wolverine claws, which are a lot of fun. The bow staff, which works really well. And if you turn on home run mode with that, that's a ton of fun. And then we also have the naginata. And that one is the most powerful weapon of the original 6. And the latest to unlock. But it also requires a lot more finesse in handling. So it's not just straight up better than all the other weapons. And some of the levels that naginata really doesn't work because it's hard to hit projectiles with it. So there's a couple levels that have a lot of projectiles, and you're not going to do well in those levels if you take the naginata.
And do you have a personal favorite of all those? I mean, what one do you tend to go back to?
I tend to go back to the naginata myself, and I've come up with a way to deal with projectiles that kind of works, but it's still pretty tough on those levels.
Yeah, nice. As I think I've mentioned this to you in a previous conversation, I'm a bit of a bowsman, so I do enjoy my archery skills. So I tend to, I feel like for me, VR, that's where it really works. I've played it in other games like Horizon Zero Dawn, where I feel like, I've enjoyed playing that, but in VR, it's just so much more satisfying.
Yeah, the bow mechanics are so good in VR. When we were looking at doing our first update, we saw that there weren't any bow games on the Oculus Quest at the time. And that was what really drove us to do that archery update.
But how did you find developing an update, and you kind of tailored it specifically for that platform and tried to find new audiences there with the game?
So the biggest challenge doing that update with that platform is the inside-out tracking makes bow games actually quite difficult to program properly, because as you draw back, the drawing hand gets out of the field of view of the headset. So there's a lot of messing things around and trying to get the hand to be stable once you've drawn it. We haven't perfected that, and I don't think any game has. But if you draw the bow back and hold your hand back for a little while, it works. If you hold your hand back for more than, say, 3 seconds before firing, that's when it starts to get a little wonky, because we're losing track of exactly where that hand should be. And it was just a ton of fun to work with that kind of restriction. All the other platforms, we just got all the great tracking for free on that backhand. So like Rift, Vive, everything just worked perfectly for the backhand for that. And then for the update itself, it was a ton of fun to work on the archery, because we just took all the things we loved about other archery games and brought that in. So we have tower defense style. We have the kind of shooting gallery of ninjas running across the rooftops. We have lots of target levels, including targets that shoot back kind of like hollow points. And my favorite is the 360 surround target level, where you just keep going as long as you can. I still hold the #1 spot on the leaderboard for that one, so feel free to challenge me there. You're going to have a hard time. I think you have to get to wave 75 on that level, and it takes approximately 20 minutes to get that far. My arm was pretty much falling off, but one of the things we saw that worked really well from Longbow on the Vive, the lab, was giving a break point. So you don't have to just straight go through the 75 waves. You can take a break every 5 waves and come back. And then once you just shoot the gigantic target that's in front of you, you can start back up and keep going.
There it is. Well, there's the challenge laid down. The gauntlet has been laid down. Good luck with that. That'll take a while.
Yeah. We also added some more weapons with that update just for fun. Some of the things that were only in the challenge mode, we brought into the weapon select. So the bow as a primary weapon, you can just do that throughout the entire game now. It's not going to be the easiest to get through many of the levels, but some of the levels, it makes it really fun and really easy. And then we put in a just gigantic battle axe. People wanted a more Viking kind of experience. So we just gave them a gigantic battle axe. And that's a ton of fun to swing around. Some people who haven't used a real axe before will have trouble with the controls because I made it feel like a real axe. Well, the big difference there is you have to peg the rotation of the axe to one of your hands. And if you're using a real axe, it's the backhand. And then the front hand kind of floats around. And so that's how I did it. But some of my coworkers who have not ever chopped wood got in and were like, this is wrong. It should be pegged to my front hand. It's like, no. That's not how axes work.
So, I mean, yeah, that's an interesting point. Like, when you were kind of doing research for this game, I mean, how much did you actually use the real weapons to kind of get a feel for how that would translate to VR?
We used it a little bit, but more so we talked to people who were familiar with the weapons. So I know some friends who do kendo. My wife does mixed martial arts, kind of Kali and Jeet Kune. So she was able to give me a lot of pointers on how weapons should be interacting, as well as some of the other people we know who do some LARPing. That helped out. And one of our coworkers does bow and arrow. So he gave lots of pointers on how the bow and arrow should work. And I think we have the most, I don't want to say accurate bow and arrow, but I think the most refined bow and arrow work of any of the bow and arrow games that I've played. Where if you switch to left-handed mode, the knock of the arrow is still on the correct side of the bow. Whereas a lot of them just kind of switch your hands and then the arrow knocks on the wrong side of the bow. We also got a very nice kind of draw mechanic where you don't have to put your hand right next to your cheek because that doesn't really work in VR. Your headset's going to get in the way if you try to do that. So you can hold your hand out a little bit more and then we just kind of tilt the bow a little bit towards your face. For the Wolverine claws, we talked to Wolverine. He had some great pointers. Just kidding.
I wish you did. You Hugh Jackman on the blower.
Yeah, that would have been awesome. We are not that popular and not good enough to get that. I wish we could. But
hey, you never know. In the future, Ninja Legends 2, right?
That'd be awesome.
So yeah, I mean, talking about, obviously, there's the amazing thing that what you've managed to refine, that the current weapons are in the game. I mean, they do feel so very responsive. They feel, as you say, that they're made to feel lifelike. And there's a level of authenticity in the game as well, which people, you play it immediately, and I think you can try different techniques with different weapons. So I mean, that's really exciting. That's quite an interesting dynamic that's not really seen in many other games that we've talked about. Certainly not the games we've talked about for this event either way.
It's how you want to use it a lot of the time. Naturally, the way we want you to use it is going to be better for the gameplay. But if you want to just do a weapon the way you want, like if you want to grab the bow staff and just start doing uppercuts, that will work. It will hit the enemies upwards and they'll go flying. If you want to use the blunt end of the sword, you could do that. It's not going to work very well, but it is an option.
Well, yeah, exactly. And that's the great thing. You can kind of be flexible in how you approach it as well. So you could really, really challenge yourself if you wanted to, put it that way. Like you've mentioned about, you could try using the bow all the way through on the highest difficulty if you really wanted to. But
yeah,
it probably wouldn't be recommended, but you could definitely.
Especially on the boss levels. That's just not going to work.
And I like that. I like that level of flexibility and customization. It kind of really lends itself to, you see so many kind of playthroughs of people just trying to do speed runs of games, or they really try to challenge themselves in unique ways. And I think Ninja Legends definitely lends itself to those possibilities if you want to really.
I've done the speed run of our game, and it's currently I think 2 hours 45 minutes.
Wow.
And a lot of that is I had to take a break in the middle because I was just sweating and breathing too hard and couldn't keep going. So yeah, if you want to do the speed run, that's going to be quite a workout.
So that's the second challenge you've laid down now. I just kind of wanted to chat as well, because we've talked a lot about the weapons, but there's also shadow skills in the game. So can you tell us how those work and kind of like what kind of benefits do they give you, essentially?
So one of the things that it gives you, first and foremost, for all of the shadow skills, it gives you a breather. They slow time down, so you have some time to think, and you don't have to rush. This also lets you catch your breath if you really need to do that. And then you get to use the special ability that you've chosen. There's 4 different ones. One is just the bow and arrow. So if you want to clear out a few other of the enemies, you could do that with a bow and arrow. Another is kind of like a Hadouken or a Kamehameha. It's an explosive ball of energy. And for that one, we let you just shoot it in a specific direction from your palm, and it explodes, taking out a few of the enemies. Some of the stronger enemies can survive that one. So it might take a bit more than just a single blast to knock out a samurai or 2. Then my personal favorite is the chain dart, which is the scorpion get over here. And you fire it out of your wrist, you pull the person towards you. If you actually pull backwards, the person comes towards you more quickly. Oof. So as you fire it out and pull back, we spent a lot of time getting that just right, because it is so much fun to do it as the get over here scorpion thing.
Totally.
So you pull them in, and then if you have like the gauntlets equipped, which is just giant fists, you can uppercut them.
Yes.
And that is by far one of my favorite things to do. If I'm not using the Naginata, that's one of the things I'll do is giant fists with the scorpion chain dart.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah, and then you turn on home run mode, and they just go flying up into the atmosphere. It's great.
I'm going to try that as soon as I get off this call. That's exactly what I'm going to be doing for the rest of the afternoon.
Awesome. And then the last one is what we call Shadow Step, and that one takes you directly to the closest enemies. If there aren't any close enemies, we're not going to waste your energy. It just doesn't work. So you pull the triggers, and you teleport to the enemies, and you get a second and a half to slice as much as you can. And then you're brought back to the center of the platform.
So they really do. They're a real mix then. So there's something there for all sort of types of play styles again as well, and you can also have a bit of fun with it as well. I guess that's the kind of the thing, like, because you're using a lot of swords, using a lot of weapons for the game as well. But then you can also mix up your play style a little bit to kind of like take a breather for a little bit to because if it's intense, all that flailing around, but also to kind of like make it more interesting for the player as well, bit fun, so that they're not just using the same weapon or the same method of attack through beginning to the end of a level, which I really like that.
And you get that choice for a given level, and each level's 3 to 5 minutes. So you can switch after that one, go to a different weapon setup, and do the next one with, say, like battle axe and the bow if you wanted to. And that ability to switch around and mix it up, it makes the game keep fresh.
And you've mentioned as well that there are also boss battles in this as well. So like you've already said how some of the shadow skills won't basically take down an enemy with one strike. I mean, you wouldn't expect that, I guess, for a boss battle. But so
no, definitely not.
Well, they'd be very easy boss battles. They wouldn't really be boss battles at all. But I mean, how do those confrontations differ from like the main sort of gameplay? I mean, what kind of skill? I guess bosses have multiple skills, whereas an enemy you tend to fight maybe 1 or 2.
Right. So each enemy has 3 types of attacks that it can do, and it has very obvious like ways it shows it's going to do a given attack. So it might like crouch down before jumping, and that'll tell you it's going to do an overhand jump attack. With the bosses, they don't signal as much, so it's harder to know exactly what they're going to do. On some of their more powerful attacks, they will. They also tend to have combo attacks. So normal enemies, they'll just hit you once and then back away. But bosses can just keep going and going and going. Also with normal enemies, they'll flinch if you hit them, and then they'll stop their attack. They'll just flinch away. But with the bosses, they're not going to flinch. They're going to keep going. You have to block them, and then you can get your hits in after blocking. This is a good example, like with the first boss, level 3, and he has an overhand attack where he does 9 overhand strikes in a row.
Wow.
And I think even on the second highest difficulty, if you don't block that attack, it instantly kills you, because it's 9 attacks in a row and it just devastates you. So if you block it with one hand, doing those overhand attacks, and then you can just go at him with the other. So you get a little bit of a time slowdown when you do a block. So you can get a lot of time to just wail on him if you hold one hand up and the other hand is slicing him from the sides. Each boss kind of has their own set of things that we want to give them to make it so the player has a way we want them to approach the boss. Another mechanic that we put on a boss, and this is only on the level 12 boss, he is invincible during one of his combos. So you have to focus on blocking him. There's just no other options. He gets like this purple fog around him, and then every time you hit him, it just instantly is blocked by his aura. So there's no way to get past that boss without blocking.
And I think that really goes back to what we were saying right at the beginning of the podcast, how essentially blocking can be so crucial in the game. So like essentially when you reach those boss battles, you really do need to learn how to block. So at that point, it's you might have been able to get away with it, I guess, up to that point potentially, but certainly you wouldn't be able to beyond that.
Yeah, and then we also have a samurai with a sword, and he's a bit of a mini boss that we sprinkle through the levels. He has a lot of the boss kind of abilities where he has a combo. He doesn't flinch when he's hit. So we kind of sprinkle him throughout to get that kind of boss feel without the crazy amount of health that the normal bosses have.
Yeah, that's a really clever way of preparing the player for what's to come. So yeah, that's really cool. And I say that I think it's nice to be able to have those boss confrontations. I guess sometimes when you play something or you try to work out, it can be a bit repetitive because you kind of like you're almost essentially competing against yourself. Whereas I guess in something like this, you feel like you're competing against somebody else to a degree. So
yeah. Absolutely.
I think that's a nice way to play it, definitely. And I guess going back to the fitness quality of Ninja Legends, I mean, have you heard back from people who've used Ninja Legends as a fitness app, and what did they have to say? What kind of feedback did they give you?
Oh, absolutely. We've had people give us great feedback on the fitness aspects. That is one of the reasons we put in endless mode to begin with, is one of our playtesters was like, I want to use this to work out. Could you put it in endless mode? So that's one of the reasons that came into the game at all. A lot of the feedback we've gotten has been it's very tailorable to the workout goals you have. And based on how much you want to work out, you can turn up the difficulty, turn down the difficulty, go to endless, go to story. The base game is kind of a standard high intensity interval training format where you have waves coming in to do the shorter intervals for high intensity, and then with the level breaks in between for like the 30-second downtime. So if you want to do that, I would say go up to Hero and turn on Invincible and go for the normal levels, play through 3 to 5, and that's kind of a short high interval training workout.
Yeah, you've had such great feedback, and I think you've actually developed the game based on that feedback, which I think is really refreshing. And if you found an audience within your game that they can actually use it as a fitness application, and as a result of that, they've actually gained something further from it than when they first purchased it. It's actually had a lastability for them perhaps they didn't anticipate when they first purchased the game.
Yeah, and we've even after launch talked to like owners of CrossFit gyms and kickboxing gyms and gotten their feedback on how well this works for their workout style, and incorporated some of that feedback in as well.
Awesome. I like that your team has been open and listening to feedback as well. And I think that's some of the really important thing about VR at the moment is that developers that are willing to listen, developers that are willing to develop their games based on how their audience likes to play. It's really refreshing, and it's not always something you find in games, but when you do find it, it's I think that breeds a kind of a not only a greater awareness to the brand, but also it's kind of a loyalty to the brand as well. And I think it's a greater connection to developers as well, because they feel like they've influenced the game in some way.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I suppose let's get to the kind of the main question of all this. Obviously, we've talked about how the game has been developed based on fitness, but why do you think that fitness works so well in VR?
I think a lot of it comes down to the ability to track movement is one of the biggest things that was required for any kind of VR automation system, whether it's a game or not. And then making it a game also makes it much easier to keep going, makes it much better on the giving a player or a user feedback on how well they're doing. And then the ability to tune that difficulty also makes it much better. I imagine many of the games that you can do for fitness in VR have a tuning ability, what you need for your workout. And so that ability to customize your workout and get the feedback that you need, both on the movements and on the overall quality of how you're doing, is something that games and VR do very well. You can see this outside of VR with Wii and the Ring Fit being huge because they're also getting that motion tracking, doing that game play. It's a great way to have fitness incorporated into something else that you want to do just for its own sake.
And I think, with fitness in VR, it's just, for me, I think we've mentioned it with Polish Ball in one of our previous videos, but it just feels like it's more entertaining in some ways. I mean, sometimes when you go to the gym, you can kind of get yourself in a routine. It can be a little bit repetitive and dull sometimes. But I think when you're in VR, when you feel like a ninja, when you're actually deflecting loads of incoming attacks and, you're swiping your sword around and you're fighting these massive, intense bosses and you've got these massive sort of target practice and archery updates. It feels much more exciting and dynamic and refreshing, and I think it's same with many other games as well. Like there are so many different ways that you can kind of feel like a ninja or feel like a boxer or feel like a racetrack athlete, and I think it hopefully will encourage some people who wouldn't necessarily be into fitness to really get into fitness or to really keep themselves healthy.
Yeah, even if you're not doing it for fitness, it's still going to do that. It's not like you can play the game and not move. And just moving, if you're not going to otherwise, is going to be a huge benefit.
Well, this is really interesting, and it was great to chat to you about how fitness benefits of Ninja Legends and how fitness really works in VR. And I think that we've had some really great discussions about that. I guess to sort of close this out, I just sort of wonder, obviously Ninja Legends is doing really well. You've mentioned at the top of this that you're still working on the PlayStation VR version of Ninja Legends. But what's next for Coinflip Studios?
We really don't know what's next. A lot of that comes down to when we finish the PSVR ports. And also, we've been working on a mobile project to pay the bills. So we're looking forward to doing something new in VR and looking to talk, or we have been talking with a couple of the different platforms to see what they want. A lot of that comes down to just after we finish this, we can figure out what we do next.
It's really exciting times for your studio, and say that it'd be great to get the game on PlayStation VR. I know there's a lot of people who've been highly anticipating that for sure. And whatever comes next year, I'm sure it's going to be great. So thanks so much for taking the time to chat to us. It was really great to learn more about the game.
And I'll just give a little benefit to anybody who's listened this long. One of the secrets that you can unlock in the game is the super speed mode. Great for working out. To do that, all you have to do is, even at the first start of the game, after you finish the tutorial, you can go up to the top of the menu. There's a button that says tutorial. You click that and you get the super speed mode. Just extra practice is the hints there. So going back to the tutorial, that's how you do it.
Nice little tip there. That's great, and great for you fitness enthusiasts. There's something different to try out in the game. But that's great. Well, thank you so much for that. And that is going to do it for today's show. Thanks for tuning in. A massive thank you to David for joining us here today. Feel free to let everyone know where they can find you and anything else you may want to share with your respective audiences.
You can find us on Discord, just Ninja Legends, and we're also on Twitter and Instagram, but Discord's the main place to find us.
Well, you can find Perp Games on Facebook. You can tweet us at Perp Games. Subscribe on YouTube using the link in the description below. And you can also find us on Discord, Instagram, LinkedIn, and get all the latest news on our products on perpgames.com. Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you next time.